just dive right in because we really need to talk about something that's quietly exhausting millions of us right now. Imagine this. You're working harder than you literally ever have before. You're stepping up, getting those promotions, putting in the overtime, totally sacrificing your weekends, and yet somehow you still feel like you're falling behind. Look, if that hits close to home, I want you to know right off the bat that you are not alone, and more importantly, you're not doing something wrong. Right now, millions of families are living this exact same frustrating reality. You see prices rising all around you, your hard-earned savings are just vanishing, and that classic dream of getting ahead, it feels like it's slipping further and further away. As we walk through all this today, think of me as your financial mentor. We're going to break down exactly what's happening to your money, why you feel so drained, and most importantly, how we can build back your financial peace of mind. So why does making more feel like less? Seriously, have you noticed how people today are pulling in higher salaries than ever before, but they're living with dramatically more stress than previous generations? I really want a financial peace of mind. So why does making more feel like less? Seriously, have you noticed how people today are pulling in higher salaries than ever before, but they're living with dramatically more stress than previous generations? I really want to validate that financial stress you might be carrying around right now. It is incredibly heavy. The truth is, millions of us are quietly struggling with this silent killer of our peace of mind. It's a phenomenon that doesn't just drain your bank account, it absolutely attacks your mental health. It methodically chips away at middle-class financial confidence, and usually you don't even realize what's happening until you're staring at your bank balance at the end of the month, scratching your head, wondering where on earth it all went. Now, we aren't going to treat this like some complex economic theory. Let's just toss the textbook jargon right out the window. Here is the real, everyday definition of inflation. It's that invisible financial pressure that quietly increases the basic cost of your survival, all while your income is desperately struggling to catch up. That's the reality. It's essentially an invisible tax on your daily life. When your paycheck stays pretty much flat, but the cost of simply keeping the lights on and feeding your family suddenly surges, that gap between what you earn and what you absolutely must spend, that is inflation. And honestly, it's becoming one of the absolute biggest destroyers of financial stability in modern America. To really see what this invisible tax looks like in practice, just think back a few short years ago. You could walk into a supermarket, hand over a crisp $100 bill, and walk out with a completely full grocery cart. It actually felt substantial, right? But today, that exact same $100 barely fills half of the cart. You're handing over the exact same amount of your hard-earned money, but you are carrying way less out the door. This isn't just in your head. It's a structural reality of our economy right now, and it is hitting families right where it hurts the absolute most, the dinner table. And the thing is, this pressure builds across your entire budget. We're not just talking about the grocery store. We're seeing an explosion of rising everyday costs across the board. Rent isn't just creeping up, it's jumping by hundreds of dollars the second your lease renews. Gas prices spike overnight. Health insurance costs explode. Your electricity and utility bills just keep climbing higher and higher. Even the most basic, fundamental necessities, I'm talking eggs, milk, bread, baby formula, they suddenly cost significantly more than they did just a couple of years ago. And the absolute scariest part of this whole shebang, while the costs for all these crucial survival categories are exploding, your salary is barely even moving. Let's put some faces to this. Meet David and Sarah. They're going to be our avatars for today, and they represent a very normal, middle-class American couple. Not too long ago, they were living what looked like a perfectly stable, comfortable life. David works full-time, Sarah works part-time while taking care of their 2 kids. Just a few years ago, their combined income actually felt like enough. They paid their rent, bought their groceries, tucked a little money away into savings, and maybe even took a small vacation every now and then. Nothing flashy or luxurious, just a normal, comfortable life. They felt perfectly financially secure. Right up until this invisible tax started creeping into their daily routine.
And here is exactly how totally innocent financial habits can spiral when the cost of living jumps. This is exactly how inflation traps people, and why credit cards have dangerously morphed into everyday survival tools. Let's walk through it. Step 1. A medical bill or a surprise car repair pops up, and you use the credit card for an emergency. Fair enough, that happens. But then we hit step 2. Because all those everyday prices have risen, there's no cash left at the end of the month. So out comes the credit card again just to pay for normal groceries and gas. Step 3. Suddenly, that balance becomes entirely impossible to pay off at the end of the month. The interest starts piling up. And finally, step 4, the debt trap. Before they even realize what hit them, families like David and Sarah are trapped in this inescapable cycle where every single paycheck is already spoken for by bills before it even hits their checking account.
Which brings us to a genuinely sobering quote from our source material. People are simply working harder not to fall apart. I want you to really think about the weight of that statement for a second. The American dream used to be all about working hard to get ahead, to build wealth, to actually thrive. But that paradigm has sadly shifted because survival itself is becoming so much more expensive. People are just exhausted. They're working overtime, driving for Uber after their 9 to 5, starting side hustles, doing late-night food deliveries. And they aren't doing this because they're greedy or trying to buy a yacht. They are exhausted, running on absolute fumes, simply trying to maintain the exact same lifestyle they comfortably had just a few years ago.
Now, understanding this wealth divide is absolutely key to removing that heavy guilt you might be feeling, because inflation definitely doesn't affect everyone equally. On one side, we have the wealthy. They generally own assets, things like real estate, stocks, businesses. When inflation hits and prices go up, the value of those assets often rises right along with them. But on the flip side, we have the middle class. Middle-class families overwhelmingly depend on a paycheck. So when inflation rises faster than wages do, the actual buying power of that paycheck slowly dies. If you've been sitting there blaming yourself for struggling to get ahead, I really need you to understand this structural reality. The whole system heavily favors asset owners during periods of high inflation.
And honestly, social media makes this entire situation about 1,000 times worse. Enter the fake internet lifestyle. Literally everywhere you look online, influencers are showing off these luxury vacations, incredibly expensive cars, pristine massive homes, and seemingly perfect effortless lifestyles. It creates a highly toxic pressure. Normal families who are secretly stressed behind closed doors about basic grocery bills and making rent start comparing their very real financial reality to these highly curated, completely fake internet lifestyles. And because of that intense psychological pressure, a lot of stressed out families get tricked into spending money they simply don't have, taking on debt, just trying to look successful to the outside world.
We really have to pause and acknowledge something with deep empathy right now. Inflation is no longer just some dry economic issue you calculate on a spreadsheet. It is a full-blown mental and emotional crisis for families everywhere. The emotional toll is just staggering. Parents are carrying massive amounts of guilt because they can't provide the same lifestyle or those little extras they once could for their kids. Couples are arguing way more frequently about money. General anxiety is spiking, and the baseline stress level inside the household is constantly elevated. And even kids are incredibly perceptive. They absolutely pick up on that financial tension in the home. It's heavy, and it is incredibly real.
But right now, we are going to pivot. I want you to stop blaming yourself and start taking back control.
Yes, systemic inflation is a real thing, and no, it is obviously not fully under your control. You cannot single-handedly fix the entire macroeconomic environment. However, and this is a massive however, your daily financial habits are fully 100% within your control. Understanding the root of the problem is the very first step toward protecting yourself from it. Once you grasp how inflation really works, you can drop that heavy burden of self-blame and instead channel all that energy into making smarter, highly intentional decisions emotionally, financially, and mentally. So, how exactly do we adapt? Let's look at the healthy financial habits that resilient families are quietly using behind the scenes. First, budget relentlessly. You need to know exactly where every single dollar is going. Second, cook more meals at home. Seriously, restaurants are a massive drain on an inflated budget. Third, build up your emergency savings, even if it's just a tiny amount from every single paycheck. Fourth, actively avoid lifestyle creep. If you get a raise, keep living below your means. And finally, and maybe most importantly, stop trying to impress people online. The families who are surviving this economy the best aren't flashy. They're adapting quickly and making smart, quiet, long-term decisions.
Here is the critical mindset shift you need to make. Real financial strength today is not about showing luxury. It's about building stability. As your mentor today, I really want you to internalize this. Trying to look rich during tough economic times will quietly and efficiently destroy your future, period. Surviving difficult times requires deep discipline and long-term planning. It requires you to actively reject the pressure to overspend on flashy appearances and instead focus all of your resources on building a concrete wall of stability around you and your family. Which brings us to redefining what wealth actually means in today's world. Real wealth is sleeping peacefully at night. It's not flashy cars or designer clothes, guys. Real wealth is knowing you have an emergency fund sitting there when life inevitably goes wrong. Real wealth is not drowning in high-interest credit card debt. Real wealth is possessing actual freedom and breathing room instead of waking up to a sense of absolute financial panic every single month. In today's America, surviving financially is no longer just about figuring out how to earn more money. It is almost entirely about becoming infinitely smarter with the money you already have.
So the crucial point I want to leave you with is this question.
The next time you open your wallet, the next time you are tempted by that toxic online pressure, ask yourself, will this purchase improve my future or just my image for a few minutes? Use that question as a mentor-approved filter for your life moving forward. Because in a world where an invisible tax is constantly trying to erode your hard work, the absolute smartest, most rebellious thing you can possibly build isn't a luxury lifestyle, it's lasting financial peace. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Take back your control, and I'll catch you next time.